I was staring at the prenuptial agreement I'd refused to sign 5 years ago, the one my lawyer had begged me to consider, now covered in her handwriting, with notes calculating exactly how much she'd get in a divorce. Next to it sat a folder labeled Exit Strategy, filled with property valuations, bank statements, and a timeline. She'd been planning her escape and her payday for over 2 years, and I'd had no idea. Before we continue, if stories like this resonate with you, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Your support helps us share these important stories. And comment below if you've ever felt used in a relationship. You're not alone. But to understand how I ended up in my own home office, surrounded by evidence of my wife's calculated betrayal, I need to take you back 6 years. Back to when I thought I'd finally found someone who loved me for me, not for what I had. Back when I believed our love story was real. My name is David, and at 38, I'd already lived what most people would call a successful life. I'd built a software company from scratch in my 20s, sold it for a considerable sum when I was 32, and then invested wisely. I wasn't billionaire rich, but I was comfortable. Very comfortable. Nice house in the suburbs, investment properties, a healthy stock portfolio. The kind of wealth that meant I never had to work again if I didn't want to, though I did consulting work because I enjoyed it. But here's the thing about having money, it makes you paranoid about relationships. Every woman I dated in my 30s, I'd wondered, does she like me or does she like my bank account? I'd had a serious relationship end badly when I was 34. She'd seemed perfect until I overheard her on the phone with her friend, laughing about how she'd landed the jackpot, and planning what kind of ring she'd demand. I ended it the next day, and I swore I'd be more careful. So when I met Rachel, I was cautious. We met at a coffee shop near my house. Not a fancy place, just a regular neighborhood cafe where I'd go to work on my laptop. She was a teacher at the elementary school 2 blocks away, grading papers at the table next to mine. We started with small talk about the terrible coffee, then progressed to longer conversations. She had no idea who I was or what I did. I told her I worked in tech consulting, which was true, just vague enough. I drove a modest Honda Civic to our first dates. Not the BMW sitting in my garage. I took her to regular restaurants, not expensive ones. I wanted to know her without the money clouding everything. And for 3 months that's exactly what I did. Rachel was different from anyone I'd ever dated. She was 28, warm, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. She'd ask about my childhood, my dreams, what made me happy. She talked about her 4th grade students with such passion and love. She lived in a small apartment, drove an old Toyota, and seemed perfectly content with her modest teacher's salary. She split bills with me without hesitation, never expecting me to pay for everything. I remember the exact moment I fell in love with her. We were walking through the park on a Sunday afternoon, and she stopped to help a little kid who'd fallen off his bike. She cleaned his scraped knee with tissues from her purse, made him laugh through his tears, and waited with him until his parents jogged back. The gratitude on that mother's face, the way Rachel brushed it off like it was nothing. I knew then that she had a good heart. After 4 months, I decided to tell her the truth about my financial situation. I was terrified. We were at dinner, a nicer place than usual, and I just laid it out. Told her about selling my company, about the investments, about the house I actually lived in across town. I watched her face carefully for any sign of calculation, any flash of greed. She looked shocked. Then she laughed. Wait, so you've been driving that Civic and living in that studio apartment when you have a house? David, that's insane. But her shock seemed genuine. She didn't ask how much money I had. She didn't suddenly start treating me differently. She just shook her head and said, "Well, I guess this explains why you were so weird about splitting the check that first month." I took her to my real house the next weekend. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a pool, in one of the better neighborhoods. I watched her reaction nervously as I pulled into the driveway. She looked around, nodded appreciatively, and said, "It's lovely, David. But I liked you just fine when I thought you lived in that studio. This doesn't change anything." And it didn't seem to. We dated for another 8 months, and Rachel never asked me to buy her things. She never suggested expensive trips or fancy restaurants. When I bought her gifts, reasonable, thoughtful gifts, she seemed genuinely touched. For her birthday, I got her a first edition of her favorite childhood book, and she cried. Not because of its value, but because I'd listened when she mentioned loving that story. Her family was working class. Her dad was a mechanic. Her mother worked in a dental office. They lived in a small house about an hour away. When I met them, they were warm and welcoming, never asking about my work or finances. Her younger brother was in community college, and her parents were proud of Rachel for being the first in their family to graduate from a 4-year university. After a 1.5 years together, I proposed. I'd never been more certain of anything. We were at the same park where I'd watched her help that little boy, and I got down on one knee with my grandmother's ring. Not a new diamond, but an heirloom. She said yes with tears streaming down her face, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. Here's where I made my first mistake, though I didn't know it then. My lawyer, Tom, insisted I needed a prenuptial agreement. He'd seen too many of his wealthy clients get burned in divorces, he said. It was just smart business. I brought it up to Rachel one evening about 3 months before the wedding. Her reaction seemed perfect at the time. She looked hurt, but she said she understood. "I get it, David. You've worked hard for what you have. I just want you to know that I love you, not your money. But if it makes you feel secure, I'll sign whatever you want." Felt terrible. Here was this woman who'd never asked me for anything, and I was basically telling her I didn't trust her. So I made a decision. I told Tom I wasn't going to use a prenup. Rachel had proven herself over nearly 2 years. She wasn't a gold digger. She was the real thing. Tom practically begged me to reconsider. "David, please. At least a simple one. Just protecting your business assets and your inheritance. She'll understand." But I refused. I wanted Rachel to know I trusted her completely. I wanted to start our marriage without that shadow of suspicion. Our wedding was beautiful. Modest by some standards, about 150 guests, held at a nice but not extravagant venue. Rachel had insisted she didn't want anything over the top. She wore a dress she'd found on sale, and she looked stunning. Her vows made me cry. She promised to love me in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, and I believed every word. The first 2 years of our marriage were happy, or at least I thought they were. Rachel continued teaching. I told her she could quit if she wanted. We certainly didn't need her income, but she insisted she loved her job. I respected that. She was independent, passionate about her work. We took nice vacations, but nothing excessive. A week in Italy, a trip to the Caribbean, visits to see her family. We talked about starting a family. Rachel said she wanted to wait a few more years, establish her career a bit more. I agreed. We had time. We were building a life together, and I was content to let it unfold naturally. Looking back now, I can see that the cracks were there from the beginning. But I was so in love, so convinced I'd finally found the right person, that I missed them completely. First signs, the red flags I ignored. The first real change I noticed was about 2.5 years into our marriage. Rachel started becoming very interested in our finances. Not in a way that seemed suspicious at first. She framed it as being a responsible spouse, wanting to understand our household budget better. She asked me to add her name to our joint checking account, which seemed reasonable for a married couple. Then she suggested she should be on the savings account too, just in case something happened to me. I added her without much thought. She was my wife. What was mine was hers, right? Then came the questions about the investment properties. I own 3 rental properties, 2 small apartment buildings and a commercial space downtown. Rachel started asking detailed questions. How much were they worth? What was the monthly rental income? Could she see the lease agreements? She said she wanted to understand our total financial picture. I was actually pleased. After feeling guilty about the prenup discussion years earlier, I was happy to show her that I really did trust her with everything. I walked her through the entire portfolio, the properties, the stocks, the bonds, my retirement accounts. I even gave her the passwords to all our financial accounts, telling her she should have access to everything. We're partners, I told her. No secrets. She smiled and kissed me, thanking me for trusting her. But looking back, there was something in her eyes that I couldn't quite read. Something calculating that I mistook for interest. The second red flag came about 3 months later. Rachel's friend Melissa came to visit for a weekend. I'd met Melissa a few times. She'd been one of Rachel's college roommates. They went out for drinks one night, and I stayed home to catch up on some consulting work. I came downstairs around 11 to get some water and heard Rachel on the phone with Melissa, who had apparently forgotten something. Rachel was in the kitchen and she didn't hear me on the stairs. I heard her say, "No, Mel, I know what I'm doing. Give it another year or 2, and then I'll have enough to be set. He trusts me completely." I froze on the stairs. My heart started pounding. What did she mean by that? Set for what? But then she laughed and said, "Of course I love him. Don't be ridiculous. I just mean I want to make sure we're financially secure before we have kids. You know how I worry." I convinced myself that was all it was. Rachel was always anxious about money. It came from growing up without much. She just wanted to ensure we were stable before starting a family. Nothing sinister. I went back upstairs without saying anything. The third red flag appeared about 4 months after that. I came home early from a consulting job one afternoon and found Rachel in my home office. She was at my computer, which wasn't unusual. We both used it sometimes. But when she heard me come in, she jumped and quickly closed whatever she'd been looking at. "You scared me," she said, laughing, hand on her chest. "I didn't expect you home yet." "Sorry," I said. "Finished up early." "What were you working on?" "Oh, just looking at some stuff for school. Trying to figure out my budget for classroom supplies next year." She stood up quickly, moving away from the desk. "I'm going to start dinner." Sound good. Seemed plausible. But something felt off. Why had she jumped? Why close the screen so quickly? I told myself I was being paranoid. That not having a prenup didn't mean I should spy on my own wife. Trust was the foundation of marriage, right? The fourth warning sign was subtle but persistent. Rachel started mentioning divorce. Not ours specifically, but other people's divorces, with unusual frequency. A teacher at her school was getting divorced, and Rachel would come home with detailed updates about the settlement. Her cousin's marriage was falling apart, and she'd discuss at length who got what in the split. "Can you believe Sarah's getting half of everything?" she'd say. Even though she didn't contribute anything to his business. That seems fair, right? I mean, she supported him emotionally all those years. Or, did you know that in this state, anything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50? Even if only one person paid for it. At the time, I thought she was just processing these stories, maybe worried about our own relationship in some abstract way. I'd reassure her that we were solid, that we weren't like those couples. She'd smile and agree, but she kept bringing up these divorce stories. Looking back, she wasn't worried. She was researching. The fifth red flag came about 3 years into our marriage. Rachel suddenly wanted to renovate the house. Extensive renovations. New kitchen, remodeled bathrooms, finished basement. She had detailed plans, expensive tastes that seemed out of character. The budget she proposed was nearly $200,000. "Don't we deserve a beautiful home?" she asked when I hesitated. "You work so hard, David. We should enjoy what we have." This was new. Rachel had always been content with modest things. But I convinced myself she was just growing, becoming more confident in our life together. And honestly, the house could use updating. So I agreed. We spent 8 months renovating, and Rachel was involved in every decision, every purchase. She insisted on the most expensive materials, the best contractors. The house looked beautiful when we finished. Rachel seemed thrilled. I was happy she was happy. But the entire renovation added significant value to the property, our shared marital asset. Another thing I didn't understand at the time. Red flag number 6 appeared in the form of life insurance. Rachel suggested I increase my life insurance policy, with her as the beneficiary. "I just worry," she said. "If something happened to you, I'd want to be taken care of. Is that selfish?" It wasn't selfish. It was practical. I increased the policy to $2 million. Rachel seemed relieved, grateful. She held me tight that night and told me I was a wonderful husband. I felt like a good provider, a responsible spouse. The 7th and final warning sign I should have caught. Rachel started working out intensely and paying much more attention to her appearance. New clothes, new hair, professional manicures. Things she'd never bothered with before. She said she just wanted to feel good about herself. And I supported it. I thought maybe she was going through some kind of early midlife realization, wanting to take better care of herself. But she also started going out more with work friends I'd never met. Thursday night happy hours became regular. Weekend professional development workshops that seemed to happen at nice hotels in the city. I never questioned it because I trusted her, and she was always home at reasonable hours, always affectionate when she returned. All of these signs were there. All of them were warnings. But I was looking at each one individually, not as a pattern. I was the frog in the gradually heating pot of water, not realizing I was being cooked until it was far too late. The first real incident that should have opened my eyes happened about 3.5 years into our marriage. I needed to access an old tax return, and I went into the filing cabinet in my home office where we kept all our important documents. That's when I noticed that several documents were missing. The deed to one of my rental properties, gone. The original purchase agreement for the house, missing. Some investment statements from before our marriage, nowhere to be found. I searched everywhere, thinking maybe I'd misfiled them. When I asked Rachel if she'd seen them, she looked confused. "Why would I have those, honey? Maybe you put them somewhere else. Or maybe they're at Tom's office." Tom was still my lawyer, handling the rental properties and some investment work. Called Tom. He didn't have them. I searched again, more thoroughly this time. Finally I found them, all of them, in a locked drawer in the spare bedroom that Rachel used as her home office for schoolwork. The drawer had never been locked before. When I asked her about it, she had an explanation ready. "Oh, yeah, I was organizing some files for you a few weeks ago and wanted to make sure all the really important stuff was in one safe place. I got that drawer lock from the hardware store. I was going to tell you, but it totally slipped my mind. Isn't it better to have them secure?" Made sense. Sort of. But why not tell me about the locked drawer? Why not give me a key? When I asked, she immediately got me a copy of the key from her purse. See, nothing to hide. I felt foolish for being suspicious. But I started paying closer attention after that. The second incident came about 2 months later. I was reviewing our joint credit card statement and noticed several charges I didn't recognize. Purchases at Office Depot, Staples, FedEx. When I asked Rachel about them, she said they were for school, supplies for her classroom, copies of teaching materials. But the amount seemed high. $300 at Office Depot. That's a lot of markers and construction paper. You know how it is, she said. Teachers spend so much of our own money on classroom stuff. The school barely gives us any budget. I let it go. She was a teacher. Of course she spent money on her students. I was being petty to question it. But then I noticed she'd been making cash withdrawals. Not huge amounts, 100 here, 200 there. But regular enough that over 3 months, she'd withdrawn almost $3,000. When I asked about it, she looked annoyed for the first time. David, are you seriously monitoring my spending? I use cash for lots of things. Coffee, lunch, parking. Small stuff. I didn't realize I needed to account for every dollar. She was right. I was being controlling. We were married. She had every right to spend our money. I apologized, feeling guilty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The third incident forced me to start documenting things. I came home one afternoon and found Rachel on the phone, clearly arguing with someone. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call. But I'd heard enough to know it wasn't a pleasant conversation. Everything okay? Yes. Fine. Just my brother being an idiot about money again. Her brother Jake was chronically broke, always asking family for loans. Seemed plausible. But later that week, I saw on our phone bill that the number she'd been arguing with wasn't Jake's. I called it from my cell, and a man answered. Miller and Associates, this is James speaking. I hung up immediately. Miller and Associates was a law firm. Not a big corporate firm. I looked them up. They specialized in family law, divorce law. My hands were shaking as I put my phone down. Why was Rachel talking to a divorce lawyer? And why would she lie about it? I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started really paying attention. I started keeping notes on my phone of strange things. Odd behaviors. Inconsistencies in her stories. The fourth incident came about 2 weeks after I discovered the divorce lawyer call. Rachel went to visit her parents for the weekend, or so she said. She left Friday after school and wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday evening. But on Saturday afternoon, I decided to surprise her. I drove to her parents' house about an hour away, with her favorite takeout from a restaurant near them. When I got there, her car wasn't in the driveway. I knocked anyway, and her mother answered the door. David. What a nice surprise. She hugged me. But Rachel's not here, honey. She called this morning and said she couldn't make it this weekend after all. School stuff, she said. My blood ran cold. Oh, I managed. Right. Yeah, she mentioned she might have to cancel. I must have gotten confused about the timing. I'll just head back. Her mother looked concerned but didn't press. I drove home in a daze. Where was Rachel? Who was she with? I checked our credit cards obsessively that whole weekend. A charge appeared Saturday evening at a nice restaurant downtown. Then a hotel. The Riverside Inn, a boutique hotel known for romantic getaways. She came home Sunday evening as planned, cheerful and relaxed. How was your parents? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Good. Tiring, you know how my mom is. Just talked and talked. But it was nice to see them. She kissed my cheek and went to unpack. I had caught her in a direct lie. She hadn't been at her parents' house. She'd been at a hotel. With someone. And she'd lied to her own mother about it too. That night, after she fell asleep, I went through her purse. I found a receipt from the hotel. Room for 2 nights, Friday and Saturday. And another receipt from a jewelry store I didn't recognize. Men's watch. Expensive. $1,500. Felt sick. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and lay awake all night next to her, my mind racing. The 5th incident confirmed my worst fears. Rachel had started password protecting her phone about 6 months earlier, saying she'd had issues with students grabbing teacher phones as pranks. I'd never questioned it. But one evening she was in the shower, and her phone kept buzzing on the nightstand. I picked it up, intending to tell her someone was calling. But the notifications on the lock screen told me everything I needed to know. Messages from M filled the screen. Can't wait to see you Thursday. Last night was incredible. Have you talked to your lawyer yet? 2 more years and you're free. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I tried to open the messages, but they required her passcode. I didn't know it. I set the phone down exactly where it had been and went downstairs, my legs barely holding me up. I sat in the dark living room, trying to process what I'd seen. Rachel was having an affair. She was seeing a lawyer about divorce. She was waiting 2 more years for something. What did that mean? When she came downstairs in her pajamas, I was still sitting there. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, concerned. "You look pale." "Just tired," I said. "Work stuff." She kissed the top of my head and curled up next to me on the couch. "My hard-working husband," she murmured. "I'm so lucky." I felt like I was going to throw up. The 6th incident happened at a dinner party at our neighbor's house about 3 weeks later. We were with another couple, Mark and Jennifer, who'd lived next door for years. Over wine, the conversation turned to marriage and finances. "We keep everything separate," Mark said. "Learned that from my parents' messy divorce." "What about you guys?" "Oh, we share everything," Rachel said quickly, squeezing my hand. "What's David's is mine and what's mine is his. That's what marriage is about, right, honey?" I forced a smile. But Jennifer, who'd had more wine than usual, laughed. "Well, sure, but David's got a bit more of the what's mine situation going on, right, Rachel?" She winked. Rachel's smile didn't waver. "I'm lucky to have married someone so successful. But I'd love him even if he was broke." The way she said it, so smooth, so practiced, made my skin crawl. After we left in the car, I couldn't help myself. "Would you?" I asked. "Love me if I was broke?" She looked surprised. "Of course." "David, what kind of question is that? Money doesn't matter to me. You know that." But I didn't know that. Not anymore. The real discovery, the moment everything shattered completely, happened on a Tuesday afternoon about 4 months after I'd started suspecting the truth. Rachel had told me she was going to a teaching conference in the city and wouldn't be home until late. I'd smiled, kissed her goodbye, and told her to have a good time. But I'd taken the day off from my consulting work. Planned this. I hired a private investigator the week before. His name was Marcus, and he specialized in infidelity cases. I'd felt pathetic calling him, but I needed to know the truth. He'd been following Rachel for a week, and that Tuesday he sent me a text. "She's at the Riverside Inn. Room 412. Same man as previous visits. I have photos." I drove to the hotel. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the building, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Part of me wanted to drive away, to preserve the illusion a little longer. But I couldn't. Had to know. I went inside. Took the elevator to the 4th floor. Stood outside room 412, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I raised my hand to knock, then stopped. Instead I called her cell phone. I heard it ring inside the room. Once. Then I heard her voice muffled through the door. It's David. Don't answer. He thinks I'm at a conference. A man's voice responded, but I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard her laugh. Actually laugh. Something broke inside me. I knocked. Hard. Silence. Then scrambling. Whispered voices. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rachel opened the door. She was in a hotel robe, her hair messed up, her face flushed. Behind her, I could see a man pulling on his pants. David. Her face went white. What are you? How did I find you? I pushed past her into the room. The man was about my age, good-looking, well-dressed. He had the confidence of someone who didn't think he was doing anything wrong. Who the hell are you? I'm Marcus, he said, having the audacity to extend his hand. And I think you and Rachel need to talk. Marcus. I laughed, but it sounded broken. You're M. Rachel grabbed my arm. David, please let me explain. I shook her off. How long? What? How long have you been sleeping with him? How long have you been lying to me? She closed her eyes. When she opened them there were tears, but they looked fake. Practice. 2 years, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. 2 years. 2 years of our 3.5-year marriage. She'd been cheating on me for more than half of our life together. Get out, I told Marcus. Now. He looked at Rachel, who nodded. He grabbed his jacket and left, but not before touching her shoulder in a way that made it clear this wasn't just sex. They had a relationship. A real one. When the door closed, I turned to Rachel. Tell me everything. Right now. The truth. She sat on the bed, and I remained standing. She took a breath, and when she started talking, her voice was different. Harder. Less sweet. I met Marcus about 6 months after we got married. At a friend's party. We started talking and things progressed. I didn't plan it, David. It just happened. Nothing just happens. You made choices. Fine. I made choices. She looked up at me, and for the first time I saw someone I didn't recognize. I made choices because I realized I'd made a mistake marrying you. The words hit like a physical blow. A mistake. Not about the marriage itself, she said quickly. About marrying for love. That's the mistake. Love isn't enough, David. Doesn't pay bills. It doesn't give you security. I stared at her. What are you talking about? You have security. We have more than enough money. We have your money, she interrupted. That's the problem. It's always your money. Your investments. Your properties. Even this house. Yes, we renovated it together, but it's still in your name from before we got married. Because I bought it before I met you. Rachel, you never cared about money. You said it didn't matter. She laughed, and it was bitter. Of course I said that. That's what you wanted to hear. The humble teacher who loved you for you, not your bank account. God, you ate it up. I felt like I'd been punched. So. What? This was all a lie. From the beginning. Not the beginning, she admitted. At first, I didn't know you had money. I genuinely liked you. But once I found out, once I saw what kind of life I could have. She shrugged. I made a choice. I decided to secure my future. By marrying me under false pretenses. By marrying a man I didn't love for his money. People do it all the time. And Marcus. Marcus loves me. Really loves me. We're going to be together after the divorce. Divorce. There it was. You've been planning to divorce me. For about 18 months, yes. She said it so casually, like she was discussing dinner plans. I talked to a lawyer. He explained how community property works. The longer we're married, the more I get. The house renovations I pushed for. Those add value to marital assets. The joint accounts. Easier to claim half. He told me 5 years was optimal. That's when it becomes harder for you to argue that anything was separate property, especially without a prenup. I sat down heavily in the chair across from her. So you were going to stay married to me, sleeping with him, lying every day for 5 years? Just 1 more year. She looked at me almost sympathetically. I know it's hard to hear, David. But try to understand. I grew up poor. Really poor. I didn't want to live like that anymore. You gave me an opportunity, and I took it. You used me. I was practical. There's a difference. I thought of the past 3.5 years. The lies. The deception. Every time she'd said, I love you, she'd been lying. Every kiss, every intimate moment, fake. My stomach churned. And the life insurance. Yes. The $2 million policy you suggested. For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. That was just being careful. In case something happened to you naturally. Naturally. I stood up. I need to go. David, wait. We need to talk about this. No. I don't. We're done talking. I'm getting a lawyer. Good one. And you're getting nothing. Not 1 cent more than I'm legally required to give you. Her face hardened. You can't stop me from getting what I deserve. We're married. Community property state. I'm entitled to half of everything acquired during our marriage. We'll see about that. Fraud. Breach of contract. I'll find a way. There's no fraud without a prenup to violate, she said smugly. You refused to get one, remember? Because you trusted me so much. She was right. I had been such a fool. I left the hotel room, got in my car and drove. I didn't go home. I couldn't face our house, our bed, our life. I drove to Tom's office. My lawyer took 1 look at my face and cleared his schedule. I told him everything. Every detail. He listened, taking notes, his face growing grimmer. When I finished, he sat back. David, I'm sorry. This is awful. But she's right about one thing. Without a prenup in this state, she's entitled to half of all marital property. The house value increased during the marriage. She gets half of that increase. The investments that grew. Half of the growth is hers. Even your consulting income for the past 3 years. Community property. What about the affair? Doesn't that matter? This is a no-fault divorce state. Affairs don't affect property division. They might affect alimony, but given that she works and earns her own income, she probably wouldn't get much alimony anyway. The property division is what will hurt. So she planned this perfectly. Married me, waited until assets grew, then planned to leave with half. It appears so. But there might be one thing we can do. You said she admitted all of this in the hotel room. Yes. Did you record it? I hadn't. I'd been too shocked, too destroyed to think of it. Sighed. Then it's her word against yours about her intentions. Not helpful. But we'll fight this however we can. Forensic accountants, separate property claims, anything that was clearly yours before marriage. We'll minimize the damage. But the damage wasn't just financial. The damage was to my soul, my ability to trust, my belief in love and marriage and basic human decency. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face Rachel, couldn't sleep in our bed, couldn't look at the renovations she'd insisted on for her own financial benefit. Tom's wife, Sarah, set me up in their guest room. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, reliving every moment of our relationship, seeing the lies woven through everything. The next morning, Tom helped me change the locks on the house while Rachel was at school. When she came home that afternoon, her key wouldn't work. She called me furious. "You can't lock me out of my own house. It's not your house. It was mine before we married, and you'll get nothing from it in the divorce except whatever value increased during our marriage, and we'll fight that too." "David, this is crazy. Can we please talk about this like adults?" "Adults? You've been lying to me for our entire marriage. You've been planning to rob me for over a year. You've been cheating on me for 2 years. We're way past talking." She tried a different approach. "I'm sorry, okay? I know I handled this badly. But we can work this out. We don't need to divorce. We can go to counseling." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Counseling? Rachel, you don't love me. You admitted it. You're with Marcus. Why would you possibly want to stay married except to extend your timeline for taking my money?" Silence. Then, "Fine. You want a divorce. You'll give me what I deserve, or I'll make this hell for you." "It's already hell. Do your worst." She did. Over the next few weeks, Rachel hired one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state. Her lawyer immediately filed motions for temporary spousal support, for half of all marital assets, for possession of the house. The legal papers piled up on Tom's desk. Rachel told everyone we knew her version of the story. I was cruel, controlling, had cut her off financially, abandoned her. She painted herself as the victim of a manipulative wealthy man who'd love-bombed her and was now discarding her. Some people believed her. Her family certainly did. Her mother called me, crying, begging me to reconcile with Rachel, saying that marriage required forgiveness. Her father was less kind. "You always thought you were better than us because of your money. Well, Rachel deserves her share. She put up with your arrogance for years." I didn't try to defend myself. What was the point? They believed what they wanted to believe. Some of our friends split down the middle. Mark and Jennifer from next door sided with me. Jennifer had always thought something was off about Rachel. But other friends disappeared, uncomfortable with the mess, unwilling to take sides. I lost weight. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus on work. Tom suggested I see a therapist, and for once I listened. Dr. Patricia Matthews specialized in trauma and betrayal. She helped me understand that what I was experiencing was a form of grief, not just for the marriage, but for the person I'd thought Rachel was. "She never existed," Dr. Matthews told me gently. "The woman you fell in love with was a performance. You're mourning someone who was never real. That somehow made it worse. I couldn't even properly grieve because the loss wasn't real. It had all been fake from the moment she'd learned about my money." Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings were brutal. Rachel's lawyer subpoenaed all my financial records. Every bank account, every investment, every property deed. They itemized everything that had increased in value during our marriage. The house had appreciated by about $200,000. She wanted half. My stock portfolio had grown by nearly $1 million. She claimed half. Even my consulting income, which I'd earned through my own work, community property. Tom fought every line item. We argued that my consulting income came from clients I'd had before the marriage, from my reputation built before meeting Rachel. We demonstrated that the house appreciation was due to market forces, not the renovations. We documented every separate asset I'd had before we married. But it wasn't enough. One night, about 2 months into the divorce proceedings, I was at Tom's office going over documents when Marcus called my phone. I don't know how he got my number, but his voice on the line made me want to throw my phone against the wall. "David, I think we should talk. Man to man. We have nothing to discuss." "Actually, we do. Rachel's making this harder than it needs to be. She's angry, hurt. She's angry. She's hurt. I was shouting. She planned this entire thing. She used me. I know it seems that way, Marcus said, his voice maddeningly calm. But I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Rachel did care about you. She just realized she couldn't be happy in the marriage. And yes, she wants financial security. Is that really so terrible? She lied about loving me. For years. She plotted to take my money. She cheated on me with you. And you have the audacity to call me and defend her. Look, man, I get it. You're hurt. But dragging this out isn't helping anyone. Just give her what she's asking for, and we can all move on with our lives. What she's asking for is robbery. Legalized theft. It's community property law. That's not theft, that's marriage. I hung up on him. Tom, who'd heard my end of the conversation, looked worried. That was the boyfriend. Yeah. Calling to tell me to just give up and give her everything she wants. Don't let them get to you. That's exactly what they want, for you to give in out of exhaustion. But I was exhausted. The legal fees alone were devastating. Every motion, every hearing, every filed document cost thousands of dollars. And Rachel didn't care, she had nothing to lose. She was demanding that I pay her legal fees too, claiming she couldn't afford representation on a teacher's salary. Never mind that she'd had access to our joint accounts for years. The actual divorce hearing was scheduled for 6 months after I'd discovered her at the hotel. The longest 6 months of my life. During that time, I learned more about Rachel's deception. Marcus, it turned out, was independently wealthy himself. Old family money. Rachel had lined up her next wealthy man before leaving me. She'd been planning to have it all. My money from the divorce, plus Marcus's money and status for her next marriage. I also discovered, through Tom's forensic accountant, that Rachel had been slowly siphoning money from our joint accounts for over a year. Those cash withdrawals I'd noticed. They added up to almost $40,000, deposited into a separate account I'd known nothing about. Legal, unfortunately, since they were joint accounts, but it showed premeditation. The accountant found something else too. Rachel had taken out a credit card in both our names without telling me, and run up nearly $30,000 in debt. Luxury purchases, expensive dinners with Marcus, hotel rooms. All marital debt that we'd both be responsible for. When Tom showed me the evidence, I felt sick. She ran up debt on purpose. So I'd have to pay half of it in the divorce. That's exactly what she did. Spent your money, knowing she'd only be responsible for half the debt. Clever, in a sociopathic kind of way. The final piece of evidence came from Marcus's social media, which he hadn't bothered to make private. My assistant, who I'd confided in, found photos going back 2.5 years. Rachel and Marcus at restaurants. On vacation together while she'd told me she was visiting her parents. At parties I'd never known about. And in the comments, friends congratulating them on their relationship, calling them a perfect couple. She'd been living a double life, so completely and so brazenly that she had an entire social circle that knew about Marcus but not about me. Sitting in Dr. Matthews's office about 4 months into the divorce, I hit a breaking point. I want to fight this, I told her. I want to expose her for what she is. I want everyone to know the truth. Why? Dr. Matthews asked gently. Because she's getting away with it. She planned this fraud, and the law is going to reward her for it. That's insane. The law isn't rewarding her fraud. The law is enforcing community property rights. Those exist for good reasons. To protect spouses who sacrifice careers for families, who contribute non-financially to marriages. But she didn't sacrifice anything. She kept working. She contributed nothing but lies. I know. And I know it feels deeply unfair. So let me ask you again. Why do you want to expose her? Is it about justice? Or is it about revenge? I sat with that question. Was it revenge? Maybe. Probably. But didn't I deserve some revenge? Didn't she deserve to face consequences? Both, I admitted. I want justice, and yes, I want her to suffer like I'm suffering. Understandable. But David, revenge won't heal you. It won't give you back the years she stole. It won't make you trust again. It will only keep you connected to her, keep you angry, keep you in pain. So what? I just let her win. She doesn't win if you rebuild your life and find happiness. She wins if you let this destroy you. I hated that she was right. But she was. Tom gave me different advice. Fight like hell. Don't give her an inch. Make her work for every penny. That's not revenge. That's protecting your assets and your future. I was torn between these two approaches. Be the bigger person and let it go. Or fight with everything I had. In the end, I chose a middle path. I would fight the divorce settlement as hard as legally possible, but I wouldn't try to destroy Rachel personally. No public posts about her betrayal. No telling all our mutual friends the sordid details. No trying to get her fired from her teaching job, though I probably could have by revealing her affair to her school district. I would fight in court, but I wouldn't fight dirty. Tom and I prepared for the divorce hearing meticulously. We gathered evidence of every separate asset I'd had before the marriage. We documented that my consulting clients had been established before I met Rachel. We demonstrated that the house appreciation was due to market factors in our rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, not the renovations. We even found comparable houses that had appreciated similarly without any renovations. We also presented evidence of Rachel's affair, not to affect property division. We knew it wouldn't in a no-fault state, but to demonstrate her character and oppose any alimony claims. Rachel's lawyer, in turn, painted me as a controlling wealthy man who'd manipulated a young, innocent teacher. They claimed I'd isolated her from her family, a lie, controlled her spending, another lie, and that she'd earned her share of the assets by being a supportive spouse. The hearing was scheduled for 2 full days. I had to take the stand and be cross-examined by Rachel's lawyer, who tried to make me look like a monster. Rachel took the stand too, and I had to sit there while she lied under oath about our relationship, about her feelings, about everything. Tom cross-examined her brilliantly. He got her to admit that she'd never contributed financially to the investment properties, that the house had been mine before marriage, that she'd had full access to all our accounts throughout the marriage. He implied, without directly accusing, that she'd been planning this divorce for a long time. But he couldn't get her to admit to the plan. She stuck to her story. She'd fallen out of love, met someone else, wanted a divorce. Everything else was me being bitter and vindictive. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened to everything with an impassive expression. When both sides rested, she took the case under advisement, saying she'd issue a ruling within 30 days. Those 30 days were agonizing. I tried to focus on work, on rebuilding my life, on anything but the impending decision. But every day, I woke up wondering what the judge would decide. The resolution, the verdict and aftermath. The ruling came on a Wednesday afternoon. Tom called me, and I could hear relief in his voice. It's not perfect, but it's better than we feared. The judge had ruled. The house would be sold, and Rachel would get 30% of the proceeds, not 50%. The judge noted that the property had been mine before marriage, and that the appreciation was largely due to market forces, not marital improvements. The investment properties remained entirely mine. They'd been purchased before the marriage with separate funds. My investment portfolio would be divided, but only the growth during the marriage, and at 40% to her, not 50%. The judge recognized that the portfolio's growth was partly due to my premarital assets and partly due to active management, which was my labor, not a community asset. My consulting income was split 50-50, but only for the duration of the marriage. No future earnings would go to her. Rachel would get no alimony. The judge noted that she had a stable career, earning capacity, and had demonstrated through her affair and planning that she wasn't a dependent spouse in need of support. We'd split the debt she'd run up, but the judge ordered a detailed accounting. Anything she'd spent solely for her personal benefit or her affair would be her responsibility alone. Total damage. Rachel would get approximately $850,000. Not the nearly $2 million she'd been demanding, but still a substantial sum for a marriage that had been a lie. I was devastated. Nearly $1 million to a woman who'd defrauded me. But Tom reminded me it could have been so much worse. She was asking for almost $2 million. We cut that in half. And we protected all your premarital assets and your future earnings. This is a win, David, even though it doesn't feel like it. Rachel's lawyer immediately filed an appeal, but Tom wasn't worried. The judge's ruling is solid. Appeals courts don't often overturn property divisions unless there's clear legal error. She won't get more. He was right. The appeal was denied 4 months later. The divorce was finalized. I wrote Rachel a check for $850,000, and she was out of my life forever. Except she wasn't, not entirely. The money I gave her, my money earned and invested years before I'd met her, funded her new life with Marcus. They got married 6 months after our divorce was final. She quit teaching and became a full-time socialite, posting on social media about her fabulous life, her designer clothes, her exotic vacations. Friends would sometimes send me her posts, thinking I should know. I finally blocked her on everything and asked friends to stop. I didn't need to know how well she was doing with money she'd essentially stolen from me. But here's the thing about karma, or justice, or whatever you want to call it. About 2 years after our divorce was final, I heard through mutual friends that Rachel and Marcus were having problems. He'd discovered she'd been lying to him too. About her past, about debts she'd hidden, about who knew what else. Apparently, once a liar, always a liar. They divorced within 3 years of marriage. And because Marcus, unlike me, had insisted on an ironclad prenup, Rachel got almost nothing. The money she'd taken from me, she'd spent it. Designer clothes, fancy cars, expensive habits she'd developed living as a wealthy man's wife for the second time. Last I heard, she was back to teaching, living in a small apartment, struggling financially. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd married me for security, betrayed me for more security with Marcus, and ended up with nothing. But knowing that didn't heal me. It didn't give me back the years she stole or the nearly $1 million she took. It didn't restore my ability to trust. It's been 5 years since I discovered Rachel at that hotel. 5 years since my world shattered. The divorce has been final for 4 years. In that time I've done a lot of healing. Therapy helped enormously. Dr. Matthews worked with me for 2 years, helping me process the betrayal, the anger, the grief for a relationship that never existed. She helped me understand that Rachel's actions weren't about me. They were about her own damaged character, her own moral failures. I've rebuilt my life piece by piece. I sold the house, too many painful memories, and bought a smaller place in a different neighborhood. I expanded my consulting business partly as therapy, partly because I needed to prove to myself that I could still build something valuable. I've dated cautiously, very cautiously. I'm upfront now about my financial situation, And yes, I require prenuptial agreements. I've learned that protecting yourself isn't the same as not trusting. It's just being realistic about human nature. I've reconnected with old friends who stood by me through the divorce. I've made new friends who know my story and accept me anyway. I've learned to spot red flags that I missed with Rachel. The subtle signs of manipulation, the too perfect facade, the eagerness to commit without really knowing each other. Most importantly, I've learned to forgive myself. For being foolish. For ignoring warning signs. For wanting to believe so badly in love that I ignored reality. That's not weakness, that's being human. The financial hit still stings. $850,000 is a lot of money, even for someone who's wealthy. It represented years of work, smart investing, careful planning. Handing it over to someone who'd lied to me for our entire relationship felt like rewarding a criminal. But I've reframed it in my mind. That money bought me freedom from a toxic person. It bought me the knowledge of what I will and won't tolerate in a relationship. It bought me a harsh but valuable education in human nature. Would I like that money back? Course. But I'm okay without it. I've rebuilt. I'm financially stable again. And I have something Rachel will never have. Integrity, self-respect, and the ability to look myself in the mirror without shame. I think about Rachel sometimes. Not with the rage I used to feel, but with something closer to pity. She spent her life chasing security through men and money, and ended up with neither. She destroyed a marriage, hurt someone who loved her, and for what? A few years of designer clothes and exotic vacations. She's in her late 30s now, struggling financially, with 2 failed marriages behind her and a reputation that precedes her. Women in our social circle warned Marcus about her before he married her. But he didn't listen, just like I hadn't listened to Tom about the prenup. We all think we're the exception, that our love is different, that the red flags don't apply to us. But red flags are red for a reason. They're warnings. And ignoring them comes at a cost. As for me, I'm 43 now. I'm in a relationship with a woman named Claire who I met through friends. She's a successful architect with her own money, her own career, her own life. We've been together for a year, taking things slowly. She knows my story. She understood when I asked for a prenup. She's never once made me feel bad for protecting myself. We might get married someday. Or we might not. I'm okay with either outcome because I've learned that legal marriage isn't what makes a relationship real. Trust, honesty, mutual respect, those are what matter. And those are things you can't fake, can't steal, can't plot your way into. I still have hard days. Days when I wonder if I'll ever fully trust again. Days when I see happy couples and wonder if they're real or if one of them is running a long con. Days when I calculate how much of my net worth is gone because I trusted the wrong person. But mostly I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm genuinely happy in a way I never was with Rachel, because my happiness isn't built on illusions. It's built on reality, on authentic connections, on knowing exactly who people are and choosing them anyway. If you're reading this, if you're watching this video, maybe you're in a situation like mine was. Maybe you're seeing red flags and explaining them away. Maybe you're wondering if you're paranoid for being suspicious. Maybe you've already discovered the truth and you're in that awful space between knowing and accepting. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. Share your own story in the comments. You'd be amazed how much it helps to know you're not alone. These stories matter. Your story matters. Here's what I want you to know. Trust your instincts. Those red flags you're seeing. They're real. That voice in your head saying something's wrong. Listen to it. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're picking up on patterns, inconsistencies, behaviors that don't match someone's words. If you're with someone who claims to love you but treats you like a resource to be mined, leave. If your partner is more interested in your assets than your heart, leave. If you catch them in lies, no matter how small, pay attention. Liars don't lie just once. They lie habitually, and they get better at it over time. And for God's sake, if you have significant assets, get a prenup. I know it feels unromantic. I know it seems like you're planning for failure. But a prenup isn't about planning to fail. It's about protecting yourself if the other person isn't who they claim to be. Someone who truly loves you will understand that. Someone who's planning to defraud you will fight it. The hardest part of my story isn't the money I lost. It's the years I can't get back. It's the trust I'll never have again, not fully. It's the innocence I lost about human nature. Rachel taught me that some people are genuinely willing to lie every single day, to fake love and intimacy, to build an entire life on deception, all for money. That's a hard lesson to learn. But it's a valuable one. If you're going through something similar right now, know this. You will survive. It doesn't feel like it in the moment when your world is shattering, when everything you believed was real turns out to be fake. But you will survive. You'll rebuild. You'll learn. You'll become stronger and wiser, even if you never wanted this particular education. And to those who might be planning what Rachel planned, who see a relationship as a transaction, love as a commodity to fake for profit, I hope you read this and reconsider. Because that money you're planning to take, it won't make you happy. The life you build on lies will crumble eventually. And you'll end up alone, untrustworthy, with nothing but temporary wealth and permanent shame. The money Rachel took from me is gone. But she lost something more valuable. Her integrity, her character, her ability to ever have a real, authentic relationship. She'll spend the rest of her life wondering if people love her or tolerate her. She'll always be the woman who married for money twice. That's a reputation that sticks. I'd rather be me, betrayed but honest, hurt but healing, poorer but principled, than be her. Looking back at that moment in the hotel room, when my entire world collapsed, I never imagined I'd be where I am now. Happy, stable, genuinely at peace. It took years of work, therapy, hard decisions, and letting go of anger that was eating me alive. But I made it. And if you're in that dark place right now, wondering if you'll ever be okay again, know that you will. Not today. Maybe not this year. But eventually, you'll wake up and realize that the person who betrayed you doesn't have power over you anymore. You'll realize that their betrayal says everything about them and nothing about you. You'll realize that you're free. And that freedom, that peace, that self-respect, that's worth more than any settlement, any revenge, any vindication could ever be. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or your own experience. Hit that like button to help others find this video. Remember, you're not alone and you will get through this. Promise.